Welcome back to Babbling Irons. As ever with West Ham, there is never a dull moment. There's always a story. There's always a drama, and again, there seems to be quite a large drama around David Moyes once again. Obviously, we're in a phase where we are rebuilding as a club, both on and off, looking to kind of put in steps for the future. However, some of that seems to be undermined, or is trying to be undermined recently by certain events, such as certain rumours, but also actual events that have actually happened, maybe showing that not all is right at West Ham, and this change is going to be a rather large one this summer. So, kind of before we kind of try and break some of that down, it's only a month away from when we were all like this. We were all celebrating one big happy family. We've just won a Europa Conference title and about to embark on the summer, full of hope, ready for the new Premier League season and also a season in the Premier League again, as we managed to stay up and stay off relegation. However, in typical West Ham fashion, we've seen quite an upheaval in West Ham structure. Not all for the bad. Actually, I think there is actually an element of good there. And we are now looking at obviously it is a four-man committee, but we have a new structure in which to help take the club forward. Obviously, we have Tim Steeden. We also have Mark Noble in his sporting director role, and obviously we have David Moyes also staying for at this point the remainder of his contract. So between those three, we have essentially a solid foundation, two that are very much well-versed in West Ham to help guide Steiten through his first window at West Ham, but also someone who comes and gives a completely fresh perspective to Noble and obviously Moyes. And the view was last season we struggled in the transfer market. I know, slightly crazy considering the players that we got. However, it was perceived that we struggled, and there were also points being made around David Moyes will not be given another penny, or the Moyes and Newman wouldn't be getting another penalty. Hence why we've gone for a Tim Steiten, in which to give us a much better and robust way of working in the transfer market, both from outbounds and inbounds, as well as just creating a new kind of footballing ethos that can permeate across the team, across the squad, and the multiple levels by incorporating people like Mark Noble much more into that fold and giving a voice to, I guess, the voiceless in terms of the youth setup and that kind of youth system. Now, obviously, that creates one level of kind of chaos, because we've gone from having Moyes having his chosen man in situ with Rob Newman. Now, Rob Newman's position at the moment, we do not know what that is. It could be untenable to the board and we ask him to move on, or he goes back to essentially being just a chief scout for West Ham. If that happens, great. I think actually we should keep Newman. I don't think there was any problems with what he did last summer. I think there were many other factors, one which weren't due to him. And I think he deserves also to remain in a position at West Ham and within our scouting department, in which to help starting with players that we previously looked at, but also to kind of, again, give that Premier League knowledge as to the types of players that maybe fit, and maybe, again, to work with him in which to form a good kind of practices on what we need to scout, who we need to scout, etc. And again, as we're not Mark Noble, the advocate for youth, we need that. We've needed it for a very long time. Now, that upheaval, whilst large, it is a good positive step. The concerns, obviously, as always, is how much control is given to, as we affectionately call him, Timmy. How much control is actually given to him? Does Moyes have the right to veto? We covered this yesterday in a video where we were saying that we don't believe if Moyes is going to remain in his last year of contract and not be given a new deal, then him having veto rights would be irresponsible, because you can't allow really someone who only has a single year left on their deal in which to be making those long-term decisions when you have, say, Noble and Timmy there, who arguably should be making those decisions above Moyes with only his input. Because again, if he's not long term, you can't necessarily give a manager that much power in which to potentially put you into financial commitments beyond his term. Now, if that wasn't enough of a kind of power struggle, restructuring that may cause chaos, may cause us to delay our process in the market, how we move forward, etc. That was then thrown into further doubt by the most recent leaving of Paul Nevin. Now, Paul Nevin is not the first coach we've seen leave. Now, you've got to question now that with maybe Mark Noble being given more of a say, which dilutes again a part of what Moyes has in terms of his control and what he has to say as to which youth players should be pushed, etc. If we've got Mark Noble advocating and demanding of Moyes, you need to give these players a chance, are we diluting his control at West Ham? Obviously, Timmy coming in is definitely going to dilute that because he's going to have much more control in the operations and the technical running of West Ham, as well as the obviously being involved in the scouting and the recruitment. So we are really diluting the power that Moyes has had, or control he has had over the last few years. And as we know, or as it's been said many a time, Moyes is a control freak. He likes to have control. He likes to manage everything. So we're essentially stripping away those layers and that level of control that he once had. And we're essentially kind of, in a way, intentionally or not, isolating him from the decision-making process, or he's and being able to essentially, if we wanted to, in some ways, for a lack of a better term, to gang up on him and to force through decisions that he may not want to move forward with. And when we kind of move forward with that, again, he's coaching staff. We've seen a turnover there. We've seen the likes of Pierce come and go twice now. Alan Irvine moves upstairs to be part of the analytical team, to move away from the coaching team. We've now seen Mark Warburton, in his own words, saying that he left West Ham in which to keep his friendship with David Moyes. And now we're seeing Paul Nevin leaving as well. Now, Warburton obviously only had a year left in his contract. However, when you listen to the brilliant interview that Hammers Chat did, he does state that he tried to bring something else. He tried to kind of talk as to what it was, and it wasn't necessarily as receptive as it could have been. What was also telling was the fact that Nevin as well, whenever we were in a match, he is the man who is standing shoulder to shoulder with David Moyes in which to discuss tactics and how we then kind of change in match. So it's interesting that we have someone who is brought in to help us improve how we play from day to day, but is arguably has no real involvement on the pitch in which to help support or to improve how West Ham kind of attack a game, for instance. Paul Nevin going is quite a big thing for West Ham. He was initially talked about as the guru for our set pieces. When we were that fantastic set piece team, he was kind of viewed as the mastermind. Done incredibly well in England with that as well. Then obviously we've seen Warburton, who's come in to try and give a new perspective on football. He's pretty much said that his ideas weren't necessarily kind of receptive. They weren't really kind of viewed or taken on. And his philosophy or ideology of football was clashing with Moyes, and he felt that he had to consistently bite his lip because he didn't want to essentially step out of line and underline the manager. So he's lost two of his staff. Now, one you would argue is probably non-impactful because he would probably argue himself he didn't have much of an impact last season, or as much as an impact as he wanted to. Nevin, on the other hand, is clearly a lieutenant of David Moyes. He is someone who has consistently been on the touchline with him to give him advice, to be his sounding board for what we need in a game when we need to change things. And now he is going. Now, what will be interesting is if Timmy's role is to be involved in all of the backroom appointments. Because if he is involved in that, then the interesting thing is, how much influence does he have as to what gets appointed within our backroom staff? Now, if he is, for instance, one of the driving forces and is making those decisions, again, it dilutes what kind of control Moyes has. It makes it more difficult for him in which to arguably have his say and to, as his title says, to be the manager, to manage. I would imagine there's going to be some level of input from Timmy, but I don't think he would necessarily be the one making the full decision. However, if he does, again, we have isolated Moyes. We are taking away support structures, or support structures have kind of left West Ham. One of his friends has now gone. Another is, or essentially his lieutenant from the sidelines is now moved on and is likely to go and work for Strasbourg with Patrick Vieira. So he's not going to be an assistant manager, not going to be a manager. He's going to do the same role. So again, that is slightly concerning that West Ham as itself, you would argue, is maybe a more appealing proposition in Strasbourg and to be in Europa League. However, that is a more desirable deal in which to go and do so, to go and learn or to essentially coach in another country. So it kind of makes it slightly concerning that he is losing his support structure. Now, if, for instance, Steve Round, who was his assistant manager at Everton for many years, assistant at Manchester United, was to come in, who is recent, and most recently, Steve Round has also been the assistant to Arteta since 2018. He has been Arteta's assistant during that period. Now, if Steve Round obviously comes in, then that is fantastic news for Moyes, because then what it also shows is the club are, again, back in David Moyes. I think the question or the problem will be is as to if someone, say, like Steve Round was to come in and was looking to come in as an assistant manager, how much time do we offer him as a contract? So if Steve Round is coming in, is it a short-term deal? So again, we're just adding to this element of confusion, the lack of direction, the lack of long-term kind of planning, because we have a manager who's at this point in time not long-term. Therefore, if you bring in any staff, they will also likely be only for the duration of his contract. So it's in a time where we probably need stability and a level of a sustainable plan or a long-term kind of view. We don't have that in our dugout, which means from a transfer perspective, it creates that level of doubt, because is Moyes going to be willing to commit for maybe lesser names to maybe develop and bring through? Or is he just going to be, I need the likes of Ward-Prowse, Paulinho. They are known names. They are players I know I can work with immediately, and these are players that can play. Is there going to be a conflict of interest in terms of how he looks to, or how he would want to work within the club itself? And that is a worry. We should be concerned, because if he is not going to be here for the long term, how can we reasonably expect him to have a fully long-term view as to how to build that squad? Now, I'm not having a pop at Moyes. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case. It's just a reasonable point as to that can and arguably should be his standpoint. I would probably be the same. If I'm only going to be there for the next 12 months, I'm going to want to ensure that I have a team that can make me achieve certain goals within that 12-month period to either secure me a contract elsewhere or to get my contract at West Ham. And then I will concern with the long term, because then I have that long-term guarantee, because there's no guarantee in football, that I have a chance in which to build. However, this season, there isn't. And what's also concerning around what essentially looks like a bit of chaos for West Ham is that Harvey Barnes was seen as our priority signing. He was a key player, a player that Moyes really liked. However, we didn't make a move. We had essentially conversations through intermediaries, but we didn't actually make a move, and now it looks like he's going on to Newcastle. So the conspiracy theory side of people will go, well, that's us making it harder for Moyes. We're not moving on his targets. We're trying to antagonize him or to upset him or to put him in a position where he doesn't feel that his position is tenable, because he's having his legs taken out from him, because he has now Noble and Timmy interjecting and adding their 2 cents and maybe having a level of control as to what he can do within his own kind of setup or his own mind as to what he wants the team to be. and we're also not getting his targets. No, it's not panic stations because we've seen us do late deals always in the past. So again, it's not panic stations. We also know Moyes likes to work later in the window. But what really is concerning is when you start to see stories of like the Alex Scott one. Now, I don't think there's any real validity in that Alex Scott story. I have no doubt the likes of Timmy and Mark Noble have worked tirelessly to find young players like Scott to maybe talk to representatives as to would he be interested. This is our kind of plan. This is our dream for him. I don't think everyone's been in a room as been intimated to have that conversation with Scott and his dad, because again that would be tapping up, and Bristol would have to give us arguably have to say yes, you by all means go sit in a hotel or go sit on a Zoom with both our player and his agent and discuss essentially a transfer whilst you haven't even submitted a bid. It just doesn't make sense. It sounds like something to really play on the fact that Moyes is slightly insecure at the moment within his role, to prey on the fact that fans are concerned with our lack of activity. Obviously, the Declan Rice saga, again, has been part of that chaos as well, and how we've not been able to commit to anything until we've seen that Declan Rice money come in, as again, further heightened this idea that what are we doing? Because there's so many unknowns from the transfer committee as to how that quadrant will work, how we're now going to restructure our coaching staff, because from what was a very closely knit coaching staff, this is it. This was what our coaching staff is. We're now currently down to only 3 coaches and David Moyes. It just makes people wonder as to what's around the corner and how we're going to move forward. And I think when you see things like the Alex Scott one, it really paints this picture using things that are arguably known and essentially using a bias really to kind of fuel a way of undermining Moyes, because we know how it was with Tomori. We've heard the story that Tomori was told, I can't offer you first team football. I'm not going to guarantee you any minutes. You will have to earn it. And once you're on the pitch, you'll have to take it. Now, principally, that comment or that idea is absolutely spot on from Moyes. It's the delivery, and that's the problem. He's seen as dour, and the way he would deliver that kind of message would not be one which will make a player feel like they are a valued member who is going to get time, and once they get time and they prove themselves, they will be one of the mainstays. And that is the problem. He potentially struggles to sell the dream because he doesn't like to be part of, I guess, that new kind of lovey-dovey, arm-round people kind of culture. He's more of that old school of you come in, you earn, you prove to me, then you earn my respect. And that isn't necessarily how players and things work nowadays. And I think that Alex Scott one that's come out, and again, it could be true, could not. There's maybe some elements in there which are truth. There is normally some truth in these kind of rumours, but I don't believe for a minute that in its entirety is the case. I don't think Moyes would actively look to sabotage deals. However, I do believe that his personality doesn't necessarily always mesh very well with people who are like Mark Noble's a bit more upbeat. Maybe for a Steinton who probably want to perpetuate a dream and an idea of what West Ham is and can be. However, Moyes will, as much we see when we talk about people being negative in social media, is, well, I'm a realist. I will say things as they are because it's real. And by saying those comments such as, I'm not going to guarantee you minutes. You're not necessarily going to be on the pitch because you need to prove that you need to be there. And when you're there, you need to take that time. And if you don't take it, then that's it. You've had your chances. So it is a bit of a concern that these types of stories are coming out. We just started our pre-season. It does look like there is in some regard, some sort of not agenda and not a campaign, but it does feel that there's some negativity creeping in only a month after one of our greatest achievements in recent history. And for many of us, the only time we've seen West Ham lift the trophy. And it does feel like there is being a bit of a kind of sway and movement in which to paint David Moyes in an even darker light than what he already is for many fans. And a lot of the criticisms are absolutely legitimate. However, it does look like that it's adding fuel to the fire. And we're already in a time which is chaotic for West Ham. It's not quite chaos and crisis just yet, but it is a chaotic period for West Ham. Losing our captain, losing two of our coaching staff. We are apparently being watched by financial fair play. We have a complete new transfer strategy structure coming into West Ham, and will ultimately then go into a whole new process of assessing players, categorizing them, assessing, and then obviously then going through that process of creating shortlist, bringing them down, and then starting that process of actually recruiting. And it is a chaotic time in which we're trying to rebuild. And maybe there are question marks around the manager's long-term future, which is also adding spice or adding fuel to that fire, with others every now and then throwing a couple of coals and throwing a lump of wood on there just to kind of stoke up that pressure to maybe have people start to root for complete change. But, you know, this is West Ham. It's never a dull moment. But let us know your thoughts. Do you think that we are chaotic at the moment? Are you concerned with our current new structure, or the way the new structure is being enforced and coming through, the fact that there's no real clear lines of kind of reporting, or even essentially who manages who? Do you think that's adding to the chaos? And do you think it's going to have a knock-on effect for the season? Or are you actually calm? You feel that this is just a period of transition which will come through and in the next few weeks, and we're just going through the growing pains at the moment? Let us know your thoughts.